Welcome everyone to another episode of the Shaman's Way podcast. As always, this episode comes from the teachings of our amazing friend and shaman in residence, Cricket. We hope you're enjoying these podcasts as much as we enjoy making them, and I'd like to take just a moment to ask you if you would please leave us a rating and a comment in iTunes or whichever podcast player you're listening to us from. Giving us a rating and sharing this podcast with others is the biggest way you can tell us that you like our show. Now, without further ado, on with the episode.
Well, hello, my constant listeners, and welcome back to Shaman's Way podcast. And I am delighted to share with you a wounding. I know I seem to be on that bit, but it's called instinct injured. When I first heard this term, it was probably in the mid to late 90s, and what it exactly meant. For me, simply put, how I describe it to myself, because instinct injured isn't really explanatory in a way, although it is a good synopsis and we'll understand why, and perhaps you're already familiar with it. But simply, this happens when over time or even after one traumatic incident, we normalize the abnormal and we abnormalize the normal. So we are creating a potential endless loop of servitude to our crossed wires and instinct injuries. Jung postulated instincts derived from the psychoid, unconscious. In shamanic language, the liminal space, the threshold between this world biological and that world spiritual. So the psychoid unconscious, from my perspective, is that liminal space. It is that threshold. So the instinct in and of itself is an interesting word. It can be used as a noun, an adjective, all sorts of ways. But I've looked at it today as a noun. So as a noun, instincts are natural behaviors enacted without forethought. As an adjective, it describes behaviors that relate to the natural abilities to think and act in ways in which we have not been taught. So instincts are active. They're immediate responses. Unlike intuition, it doesn't really contain sense or feeling. A day-to-day instinct for me is slamming on the brakes to protect myself from the movement of the cars around me, and sometimes due to my negligence and sometimes due to others' negligence. So the instinct of survival, that has been also accentuated into my consciousness as a woman, resulting, many of us, well, maybe not many of us, but a lot of us, I guess many and a lot. Anyway, I'm sorry. Well, a lot of us as females, we tend to cross the street to avoid males or packs of people that we perceive as threatening. So we're hardwired to instinctively respond, to save ourselves from that which, probable or improbable, is threatening our life. I also think that we are equally hardwired to save our loved ones from that which threatens their lives. If you take a look at any photo essay submitted by photojournalists from any war or famine zone, from the growing number of movements of humanity who are refugees, you will see what people go to, the great lengths that they go to keep their families alive, intact, and moving forward. Instinct can give us superhuman strength, and that includes emotional as well as physical. When I wanted to put this together and explain instinct injured, I wanted to try to give something that might, that I could teach you with. And the only thing that I have is reviewing my own past. And I've done that enough times over the course of our meeting through the microphone and the speakers that many of you know my journey and know my story. So what I'm going to say is that what happened was, in reviewing my childhood and going through it over the years, this was my journey to explore what were my innate responses to things that occurred around me, and how then could I attempt to heal what I saw as my injured instincts. Now, I have researched how my brain was injured during traumatic experiences that I have lived with. We have 3 brains, and any simple search will show you, if you're not familiar with them, what they are. But suffice to say, or what I want to express, is that trauma rests with the reptilian brain. That's the first brain that was developed. And this is the brain which takes control. It shifts our body into reactive mode. What it also does is it shuts down all non-essential body and mind processes. It is survival mode. During this time, the sympathetic nervous system ramps up the stress hormones, and this prepares us for the stress response. Most of us familiar with the flight or fright and the freeze. So in a healthy environment, when a situation returns to normal and the threat leaves, the parasympathetic nervous system shifts the body into restorative mode, meaning a reduction in stress hormones. This allows the brain to shift back to normal from a top-down structure. One of the ways that predator and prey animals occur or do this is there are certain animals that fake death. If they've been found by a jaguar, by a lion. And the gazelle, I'm thinking, is the one I'm thinking of the most, or an antelope. And what they do is that they fake their death. And cats, especially the lions, they kill by crushing the windpipe. So they believe then that the animal is dead, and they drag it away, or they drag it to where it's safe, and then they go off to get, at certain times go to get their cubs, or other members of the pride are coming in. And it's at that moment that the prey gets up and runs as fast as it absolutely can. But if you continue to watch, what happens is those animals will shake from the top of their head to the tip of their hooves. And what this does is it releases the chemicals in the body. It releases that frenetic energy. It releases that trauma energy. You literally shake it out. So that's using the parasympathetic nervous system. So it shifts the body into restorative mode. So oftentimes after we're highly stressed, we also get very tired, or we go into insomnia if we've been stressed for days upon days or time upon time. Not all of us, though, get the chance to regularly return to normal. So therefore, the shift from reactive to responsive mode never occurs. So what happened is my reptilian brain became hyper-aware to threat. And this was supported by dysregulated activity in my brain structures. And this held me in a constant reactive state. And I noticed if I'm in a long-term stressful situation that my body returned to that constant reactive state. It's exhausting. And the exhausting symptoms for being instinct injured and not knowing how to protect yourself, or not being aware that you need protecting, or there is something that the body is reliving over and over, are intrusive thoughts. So unwanted memories, mood alterations, shame, blame, persistent negativity, hypervigilance, exaggerated startle response, hypervigilance. How many people do you know go into a restaurant or go into a coffee shop, and the first place that they seek is a corner with their back against the wall? And oftentimes hypervigilance includes walking into a room and being able to read the room in minutes. If oftentimes adult children of alcoholics, they display various similar behavior patterns, and hypervigilance is one of them. If you come from an abusive home or a trauma home, or a home that is highly dysfunctional, often you're hypervigilant, and often you have the shame, blame, you have that negative voice inside your head. For myself, what I was experiencing before I started on my journey to really improve my instincts and heal from this trauma was I experienced memory loss, concentration challenges, insomnia, nightmares, and emotional numbing, and also disassociation. I mean, I disassociated. I could disassociate quite easily, and that also actually helped me in my spiritual journeys, because I was so used to disconnecting from my physical state that traveling in the spirit world came to me as second nature. At least that's part of what I think. And the other fact, I think that if you believe in reincarnation, or you accept reincarnation as a reality, that you have multiple lives in one thing or another thing. So I think coming into shamanism and using it as a tool to really aid me in my instinct injured, or, learning how to normalize normal and abnormalize abnormal instead of the other way around. So in this regard, I've learned different tools that I brought forward with me. I think I brought forward with me, because some things just certainly seem to come easy as can be, in ways of learning to heal that, or even recognizing that this could actually be going on. So protection is a natural instinct. However, when one is not safe, the natural instinct to protect ourselves by expressing fear or terror isn't always allowed. So that lack of safety for me manifested as burying my feelings, particularly anger and sadness. And then what also occurred for me in my instinct injured self was I feared other powerful emotions, even positive emotions like fun and joy. As a coping mechanism, I also avoided conflict, and conflict would often make my throat tighten. So here we have a physiological response to my instinct to be quiet. Then my chest tighten, that anxiety going in the belly, and the chest tighten, and the shallow breath. And as I mentioned earlier, disassociation. When I did express my anger, especially in my first adult relationship, I blocked what I said, not remembering my words. At times, many times, not remembering the specifics of the verbal volleying. And I got very, very tired after each argument. So that's my parasympathetic nervous system trying to get me to lay down, trying to get me to sleep so that it can restore my body. Unfortunately, then you go into the brain, and the brain, I think, in a sleep cycle could move through that. However, I also was unable to decipher the difference between assertiveness for anger. So internally, what I did was I sought approval from others, and that helped me to lose my own identity in the process. So I then isolated myself as a coping mechanism, and I also chose partners in my early years who also isolated me for their own, for the own codependent dysfunctional relationship I was in. When I look back on my childhood, I know that my parents, especially my mother, I don't believe that she consciously set out in her life to harm children in the ways that she did. But those effects are continuous gifts, and being inflicted with intense pain, physical, emotional, spiritual, mental, and shame. So I instinctively shut off, suppressed my emotions, because otherwise I would have been so overwhelmed there were days I would not be able to get through. So the habit of emotional cutoff didn't end when I grew up. And I had not embarked on a healing journey. If I hadn't embarked on a healing journey, I would have stayed in that place, and I wouldn't be able to access my emotions. Using shamanism in the process of healing, where it was extremely difficult for me to know what I was feeling, so I had to use other tools to help me to even express what emotions were. So I got feeling wheels or emotional charts, and that's when I was able to identify more than 5 emotions. It really is quite fascinating to me how beautifully and challenging shamanism has helped me to heal myself. My mantra, my unconscious mantra for many years was don't trust. my natural instinct to think adults are safe was definitely broken. Dysfunctional families can often be so absorbed in concerns related to themselves and their particular dysfunction, they forget, sometimes they're unconcerned with the needs of other family members. So for me, an example from my childhood was Christmas, and that was the time of the year where my mother's mental illness went into high drive. As a result, as a result, to this day, I still can't stand Christmas. But when my children were small, I made a really, really strong effort to change my instinct of Christmas is a horrible time of year full of fear, stress, anxiety, walking on eggshells, physical abuse. I absorbed a steady diet of such experiences and naturally absorbed the message that there was no one in whom I could have any faith in. And in Jungian terms, I encountered the devastating negative side of the archetypal mother and the archetypal father. So Christmas, even though I was able to, for a period of time, move into a more comfortable place, it was only because I wanted to consciously heal myself, and my children helped me to consciously heal myself. I'm much better now about Christmas than I used to be, but my children are adults and I don't have to decorate my house, but that's a whole other story about a whole other neuroses that I have, but that's irrelevant. I'm not sure when my instinct to respond to reality became clouded. I'm not sure, but I did become an expert at denying the reality around me, both in terms of emotional reality, but often also in terms of just plain facts. I became an expert at avoiding talking about the difficult areas of my life. In my young adult years, I resisted talking about anything painful or urgent. I also held the belief that no one wanted to hear me anyway, so why speak? And in doing this podcast, this may be my 76th or 77th, you can see that I've healed the belief that no one wants to hear me. And I have healed the natural instinct to don't talk. I have healed the natural instinct of don't trust. Not as much as I'd like to, because sometimes don't trust gets, I get smacked with it again, and then I have to be all brave and adult and not dysfunctional and open my heart and open my chest and open myself up to experiencing the world again. So it's not like we heal completely. I think in my case, at least, the instincts that were injured are more likely to return to their normalized state than the healed state. And the normalized state, I think, can become the preferred state because it occurred, that normalized state, that abnormalizing the normal and normalizing the abnormal, occurred before I was conscious of memory making, before I was conscious as a young child. So I think the automated responses are often how we move in this world, that's our default. So I have to constantly work on not going to the default. So in other words, I learned to respond to my environment before I could speak. So, and when we were small, we all learned to process our world through senses and our autonomic nervous system. Because I had injured instincts, and I was very likely, when in my shamanic journeys, and often would encounter my inner child or my small self, or the fetch, or whatever you wish to call it. And it was really often unprotected. In other journeys to heal the injured instincts, I encountered that positive mother archetype, and she was inner and fiercely compassionate teacher, but she was tethered. And oftentimes my young soul piece, or the memory, or trying to repair the instinct, my psyche would provide me with two very distinct parts of the journey, the young soul piece is stuck, isolated in a room without access to its protector. And I often find that situation as well when I do soul retrievals for people, is that oftentimes there's they don't have access to a protector. They're tied somewhere, they're hidden somewhere. There are many ways that the psyche sticks an aspect of ourselves in unwitting and oftentimes in unwilling manners. So I'm still working slowly and patiently and kindly with my internal family. And I have learned how to protect my inner self. And I'm learning and have learned how to find my own relationship with my own inner compassionate mother teacher's voice. And I find that manifesting outside of myself as well. So as I'm healing my inner self, my exterior self, my exterior relationship with others, my relationship with compassion, my relationship with mothering and teaching really has evolved. As I integrate my healing, I have to seek a new voice or my own voice. And that voice very early on longed to set boundaries in a loving and integrating way. And in doing so, to stop compromising my needs for the comfort of others. So my instinct injured self is healing and recognizes now personal needs and wants. I want to read you a quote from the book Women Who Run with the Wolves, and this is by Clarissa Pinkola Estes. The instinct-injured woman usually gives herself away because she has a difficult time asking for help, recognizing her own needs. Her natural instincts to flight or flee are drastically slowed or extincted. I liked how she made up a word there. Recognition of the sensations of satiation, off-taste, suspicion, caution, and the drive to love freely and fully are inhibited or exaggerated. The impulse to play is an instinct. No play, no creative life. Be good, no creative life. Sit still, no creative life. Speak, think, act only demurely, little creative juice. Any group, society, institution, or organizations that encourages women to revile the eccentric, to be suspicious of the new and unusual, to avoid the fervent, the vital, the innovative, and to impersonalize the personal. Although instinct can be injured, as I've just talked about, it can be repaired. And it takes time to recognize and to reprogram the instinct-injured behaviors, the thought patterns, and reactions. And Jung would encourage us to integrate the newly awakened healthy instincts. For me, I found it useful to find a person who emulated a healthy instinct response to something. So setting boundaries, or to speak fiercely, but not with the mind to harm. So much like a cub would watch its mothers to learn good survival techniques, I watched primarily women, because I'm a woman, that I found I wanted to emulate and that I wanted to have a stronger voice. And that has really helped me in that journey. One beautiful intellect that for me taught me more about compassion, understanding humanity, is Martin Luther King Jr. And he has inspired me my whole life. And I have learned how to perceive that world, not that world as in the world that separates black and white, but that world in the world of forgiveness in the face of such adversity, and not just forgiveness, but attempting to understand in the face of such adversity. So I retrained or trained my eye to see my family and my parents through those eyes, through the eyes of compassion, through the eyes of love, through the eyes of understanding. That is primarily one of the things that really helped me heal. I don't think there's always a perfection of instinct, but more so the questioning of one's instinct. Are they present, and if so, in what condition? Then one can move over a lifetime to adjust into the effectively balanced area of your instincts. So there isn't a perfection of instinct. And like I alluded to earlier and spoke of earlier, there's a continuous growth process, and it's easy to slip into the autonomic experiences, and it's harder to stay, especially in the beginning, in your newly acquired behaviors, in your newly acquired wisdom. So instinct and wisdom combined help us to know when to run toward, when to stand ground, when to stand still, and when to crouch and when to retreat. By moving towards my own agency of consciousness, I saw the beginning of the medicine wheel as a tool to healing myself, a way to move out of the center of the wheel, that integral part of me, which identified as emotional and psychological torture. So as I walked out of the center of the wheel and I moved towards the east, the wheel led me away from the darker shadows, away from my own dark self. And since then, I have fought tooth and nail to awaken my own consciousness and keep it. The rise of my alert awareness and the ever-evolving awake awareness. Injured instincts allowed me to fall under the spell of the sorcerer and the shadow. Each time I found myself within the grips of my exhausting symptoms and unwanted memories, mood alterations, shame, blame, hypervigilance, emotions, nightmares numbing. When I encountered them and still encounter them, I try to rouse myself and the cycle, wiser for the next time. As I walk the wheel for my healing, a story emerges, one of transformation of my injuries, of no vision, no insight, and no voice, and no action, to wide vision, to introspection on the west of the wheel, to finding my voice, and to learn how to respond instead of react. So when we have an instinct injured of freezing, so no action, we can tend to, in the first part, we can tend to do one of two things. Well, we can tend to do nothing, as in no action, or we can react to something, which is doing something without thinking of it. So kind of like an instinct, only with an edge. But when we respond, then we fall back upon ourselves, we go into ourselves, and we consciously acknowledge what is going on, and we consciously acknowledge where we are, or try to, anyway. A profound healing journey occurred for me when I refuted my very own long-held belief I had never felt safe. That permeated me. That was so deep, that instinct-injured part of me. I truly believed I had never, ever felt safe. And then I embarked on a journey. It wasn't mine. Somebody else was leading it. And the suggestion was to travel down your lifeline to a significant time in your life when you felt, I can't remember if the leader was talking about safety or if the leader was talking about something else. I don't know. But I found myself at a very young age feeling absolutely safe and joyous. This revelation instantly rewrote some of my deepest trauma stories. I banished that stupid sorcerer, that stupid predator called unsafe, and I embraced the opposite. Changed every relationship I undertook. And it became imperative for me to unlock and pry things open to see what's inside. West and east on the wheel have given me invaluable insights and have enhanced my ability to even stand what I see. I challenge myself and my long-held injured instincts, which require me to stay silent, by speaking my truth in a clear voice. I like using my wits to see what needs to be done. Walking the wheel and investing in healing my instincts has made me stronger in my instinctual nature. I intuitively recognize the innate traps I have set by their scent, their sight, their sound, sometimes even anticipating its presence, hearing its approach, and then taking steps to turn it away. In the instinct-injured person, the predator, the shadow, the sorcerer, is upon them before they even register its presence, for their listening, their knowing, and apprehension are impaired, mainly by introjects which exhort to behave, be nice, and especially be blind to being misused. Physically, it is difficult at first glance to tell the difference between the initiated, who are yet young and therefore naive, and those who are injured in instinct. But we learn to see them. We learn to see yourself. And when you see yourself, and you then recognize different instincts or different behavior patterns in others, it takes time to get to know that dark predator, the shadow, the sorcerer. Fortunately, when the predator element of our psyche is on the move, it leaves behind unmistakable tracks in our dreams. And these tracks eventually lead to its discovery, capture, and containment. And if you say you don't remember your dreams, maybe you remember how you felt when you woke up from the dream. But whatever is stalking you is usually going to stalk you in your dreams. It's going to stalk you in your emotions. It's going to stalk you in your perceptions. The cure for both the naive and the instinct injured is the same. Practice listening to your intuition, your inner voice. Ask questions. Be curious. And see what you see, hear what you hear, and act on what you know to be true. Spirit often tells me we are born with all of our intuitive powers intact, and these powers can be eroded and covered over by whatever means was used to injure our instincts. This is not the end of the world, for we can release ourselves from the weight and the ties of our scars and our traumas. With some chipping and scraping and practice, your perceptive abilities will be returned probably brighter and stronger. By retrieving these powers from the underworld, the shadowland of our psyche, we're not simply victims anymore of internal or external circumstances. I recommend to start connecting again to emotions. And if you are emotionally stunted, seriously, look up an emotion wheel and try to recognize that there are many variations and permeations of emotions. And when I ask people to name emotions, and I ask people often in my healing room, they're often in single digits, or in single, they can only name less than 10. So connecting with the emotions, because emotions and emotional stunting is the basis, uncovering that is the basis of trauma resolution. It's the basis of healing. So I've met lots of people stuck, frozen, and numb to themselves and the world. And some take longer to defrost than others. But it does take place because we pay attention to our pain and we go below the surface of our own story. Our emotions, once they begin to flow, we can begin to listen to what the body is saying and honor this by speaking for it. So I asked for validation from partners and friends, and that, validation from how did I feel? What was this like? Can I be cherished? Empowerment around emotional health and wellness, those are pivotal to building up trust and faith in self again. Empowerment around emotional health and wellness. That really is shamanism, because the individual journeys, the individual lessons, the things you embark on, those empower you. To have someone stand beside you and tell you that this means X, Y, and Z, it's not very empowering. It gives you information. What you do with that information can empower you. But when we seek to find ourselves, when we seek to find our own stories and rewrite our trauma stories and rewrite the expectations of self, then we really find value. We're finding value. Once trust is again established as something to at least be considered in the future as having value, we can begin to make decisions based on all pieces and parts of ourselves. And that's really very interesting, because I have noticed through the years that we don't trust the various aspects of ourselves. I think I've talked about this. I have talked about this in the Chakra Guardians podcast that I did a long time ago. And what I noticed was that some chakras wouldn't speak to each other, and some chakras couldn't stand each other. So the process is you journey to the root chakra, you meet the guardian of the root chakra, then you take the guardian to the second chakra, and they have a meeting. And then the first and the second go to the third and meet the third, and they talk and all that goes on. And there are many times when they can't get the guardians of their chakras to move. People can't get the guardians of the chakras to talk to each other, to be friendly. And here we have that trust. We don't even trust ourselves. So our gut doesn't trust our heart, because our gut has known, I should have trusted my gut. But you made a decision with the heart based on intellect. So now we have mistrust between the gut, the heart, and the brain. The three brains in our body, they don't even trust each other. Good gracious, hey? So let's ponder the question. What will you listen to next time? The head, the heart, the gut, or all of it? And every day we see and experience things both good and bad. But what happens when the things we see and experience break our spirit and eat into the deepest, darkest corners of ourselves? These things really change us. Now, trauma, whether big or small, in childhood or as an adult, changes us and the way we experience ourselves, how we experience others, and most definitely how we experience the world. When we suffer trauma, the natural human instinct is to protect ourselves. And often we do this by finding ways to cut ourselves off through denial that we've been hurt, disassociation from the painful event or the people involved, the repression of the memory of trauma. While traumatic incidents undoubtedly affect us, what shapes our future, for better or worse, depends on how we process trauma and the stories we tell ourselves. And it's never too late. It's never too late either. It took me 50 years to recognize that I actually had felt safe at one point in time, or 45 years, or whenever that was. Fundamentally shifted my whole life. That was a long held. So you can change. We think about digging in the dirt to heal the places we've been hurt. And that's a conversation I think we're starting. For me, I often think this is how I view it when myself has been absolutely broken. I see my soul as fresh soil. And what I've learned in my years of doing shamanic work, instead of repressing the emotions, I dive as deep into the emotion as I can. Whether it's grief, whether it's anger, whatever the emotion is, if I go as deep as I can, I get out of it healthier and quicker than if I put it away. But if I just face it, then I'm not stuck in that cyclical, stupid loop that I had been put in and put myself in. Intuition and instinct are intertwined, and they compose a whole and a piece of the divine within all of us. So from my perspective, intuition, well, it certainly is subliminal, and it is the subliminal processing that serves instinct. But unlike instinct, it is a sense, a knowing, and not arrived at through rational thought. When instinct is injured, the intuition supports the injured instinct. Ran across a very wonderful abstract and short synopsis, 21 or 22 pages, on trauma and spirituality. What the researchers found was that trauma could be healed, which we've talked about, but it is healed more so in a person if they have a relationship to spirit, whatever that relationship is, however the relationship to spirit is defined, what it looks like, what the confines are, what the house looks like, whatever. But that it is a very important aspect of ourselves, and that we are more likely to heal if we can have a spiritual, how can I put it? Well, I'm sure you're all getting it, but trauma is healed better and faster, and I think more effectively if we have a spiritual component. I'm not an atheist or an agnostic, and so if you're an atheist or an agnostic and are just listening to Shaman's Way out of curiosity, please send me a note and let me know if when you're moving through trauma and you're healing trauma, do you find, although maybe you can't answer this because you don't know both sides of the fence, but did you find that not having any faith or any belief in something outside of self, greater than self, or however you want to deem it, did that slow the process? Or did that slow the process? Are you still engaged in the process? I don't know. I don't know. I'm seriously asking. But I think, from my perspective, I wouldn't have even embarked on the journey of healing my injured instincts if I hadn't found a possible way to do that. If I hadn't been embraced so fully and completely by shamanism the very first time I tried, I don't know if I would be able to share these stories with you today. It would be the same story or a different story. I don't know. What I do know instinctively is that I am better now than I was 25 years ago, 20 years ago, 15 years ago, 10 years ago. It continually gets better. And there are times when you backslide. But I believe that trauma is an everyday reality and that we cannot avoid it. But I think that if we are awake and aware, if we have alert awareness, then we can begin on the journey to exercise and exorcise those parts of ourself that no longer serve us. Heal the parts of ourself we need healed, and exercise those parts. So if you're attempting to heal compassion, exercise compassion. If you are attempting to heal trust, exercise trust. Exercise trust in little ways. Maybe trusting that someone is going to hold the door open for you, or trusting that whatever. I don't know your life, so I don't know what you would want to trust for, and I'm just searching in my brain, and it's not going to be very helpful to anybody by doing that, especially trying to interpret how you feel or what you feel something about. It is an interesting life we lead, and there are many aspects to the brain that keep us stuck in the loops. That reptilian brain is a strong and powerful brain. It holds all of our instincts, and we have many different aspects of ourselves that hold on to those instincts as well. And I want to talk just a very little bit about the adaptive behavior. For the adaptive behavior protection, so this behavior occurs in response to pain, sometimes a threat of destruction, but the proper emotion is fear or terror. Then we have the adaptive behavior of destruction. So this is destroying a barrier that prevents the satisfaction of some sort of important need. So I had to destroy the story that I wasn't safe, but that's not the point of the story. Sometimes we just destroy things, and so the emotion is anger or rage. So we come with all of these things: rejection, disgust and loathing, exploration, examining our environment, expectancy, anticipation, orientation. So that brief response, that stopping or freezing when something new happens to us. We can't quite determine. Our brain hasn't yet, or instinct yet, hasn't classified this as something harmful or something beneficial. So we have surprise or astonishment. And I would add bewilderment in there, because sometimes things just bewilder me. I hope that we have explored this topic enough for you, and I look forward to meeting you around the speakers, the headsets, the headphones, the earbuds soon. And I wish you a most pleasant morning, day, evening, night, whatever it is. And may Spirit look upon you. May you have a good laugh this week. May you have a good cry if that's what you need. May you have some comfort in your life, and may you know and may you seek help if you have instinct that are injured, and you know that you can be healthier than you are now. Thank you for your kind attention and your wonderful awareness.
Thank you again for joining us here on the Shaman's Way podcast. If you have any questions, would like to make a request for a future episode, or if you're looking for other shamanic resources, including free drumming tracks, please visit us at shamansway.net. Until the next episode, be well, everyone.